Marcus
Well,
Cartorius.
Christopher,
How are you, sir?
how is your ankle? First and foremost, how's the ankle holding up?
It just is. It just is. It's no better. It's no worse. It has its moments. Yeah. It just is right now. Playing the waiting game. Yeah. Fingers crossed. Surgery's only 2 weeks away, so I'll tackle it then. But in the meantime, play the waiting game.
Perfect.
Yeah. What about yourself?
Yeah, good. It's amazing how quick.
In the beanie.
You know what it is? My heating in the house here is, I have to say, it's not that great. It takes a long time to heat the place up, and sometimes it's not worth it if I'm going to have it on all night. So if my head or something's a bit cool, I just sit and put my beanie on, or I sit with my gloves on sometimes watching telly. I put another layer on, right? I grew up in Scotland. Yeah.
Love it.
Another week.
How's your week been?
Yeah, I just find these weeks are going so bloody quickly. And I'm just finding still I'm doing so much more. Like, I just seem to be so much busier. But not like busier, productive, but not busy necessarily in a commercial sense. You know what I mean? It's just insane.
Well, whenever someone tells me they've been busy, I always say, busy good or busy bad? Because there's two kinds of busy.
It's been busy, like productive. Yeah, very productive. I think I said to you, I've been watching very little. I might have a background move, but I'm not watching anything if I've got time. I had this idea. I thought I write a lot. So I actually spent a couple of nights this week going back over all my media angles, stories I've been writing, work on, hadn't quite finished. And I've actually culminated. I think I've just built another book in 2 nights, 40,000 words from that alone. It's weird. Yeah, you know, I actually just sent it to my mum and she started. I said, Mum, I may have just crafted it, but not for right now. I'll do it later in the year. We've still got the main thing for this year to go through. But, you know, I'm just using my time productively, I think.
You haven't even officially released the last book yet, Mark. Slow down.
Yeah, I know. It's how my brain works. Get to it in a minute. But it's been a weird week again, I have to say. So I know we kind of talk about our weeks. I'm finding, and I shared this with you quickly before, but I'm finding a trend right now for me that I'd noticed anyway the last couple of years, but amidst this whole lockdown, it's really emphasized. And that is quality of relationships and who your network really is. And I don't know whether it's because I think algorithms on digital have all changed, but even socially, digital, I don't put a lot of faith or stock in that anyway. That's just kind of plummeted right down. And the only real conversations I'm having of any real depth or meaning is not a surprise, because it's the ones that I'm on the phone to people to, or in a deep written email conversation to, that's that one-on-one, because anything else is just, dare I say it, surface and pretty shallow and crap. You know, and you really do get to know who's got your back amidst this mess. Who's actually phoning you, right? Or who you're talking to.
Yeah, when you said last week that you had one of your friends actually phone you, I thought that's incredible. Like, I mean, I get a lot of messages from people, but very rarely would somebody think to actually just dial the number and make a phone call. Yeah,
that's it. But that's the deal. I don't know. It's not our judgment. Like, we all have different what we qualify as relationships. We'll save that for another time. Like, that's the whole Dunbar's number of 150 and all this stuff. We can keep that for a deep dive another time. But one thing sure is you know, it's when you're in times of trouble, you really know who your networks are and who's got your back. And to be quite frank, who doesn't? The people will be the talkers and not the doers, right? Who's really got your back, going to support you. I think it shows up when you're in crisis and times of trouble.
Absolutely. I know being a natural, I guess, self-identified extrovert, you know, I thrive off that physical energy with people. I always have, you know, sort of always will, and trying to replace that, you know, with something like a digital medium is different. But I think then, you go a bit deeper on that, and you start to, you know, to look at what it actually is in those relationships that you both give and you get from, and that's the part that is a lot harder to ascertain in the world of digital than it is with those physical, real relationships where you kind of know what you're getting.
Very true.
Very true.
Very true. There's always a payoff, though. There's always something you're getting out of it. So, but what about you, Chris? What's been happening for you this week?
Oh, I've been going on somewhat a journey, I guess you could say, since having seen the doctor. So go along, get that hard message across of kind of, Chris, you know, you're an absolute idiot. Start putting your health first. This is crazy. I respect the fact that you're a busy man, and I respect the fact that you've got your goals and everything you're doing. But by not putting your health first, you've now found yourself in a position where you're going to be off your feet for 2 months. Yeah, I've kind of ended up going down this little sort of rabbit hole of exploring then where do my priorities actually sit. And I know I've touched with you before, but I'm using this time to kind of revisit some of the framework and model that we run through with the startups. And I know traditionally what I've done with the startups is kind of, when we first start to onboard one of the cohort members, I'll spend a bit of time kind of talking to them and getting an understanding of what's their driving passion. Now, how is it that they've actually arrived at that particular idea being the one that they want to give their all to? And for me, it helps me understand what's going to drive them through the challenges that they're naturally going to face. So if I know where they're coming from and I know what it is that they're prioritizing, I kind of know then how to work with them and continually feed that through those challenging times. But I've also recognized that that is very one-dimensional in the fact that if we arrive at that one passion, we tend not to explore the other areas and then that part of balance between each of them. And so this is something that I guess theoretically and intuitively I've always understood. But on reflection, I'm starting to realize now the trade-offs that you make naturally without physically thinking that you're making a decision on these things. And I think back just over the last few years, the amount of times I've traded off a commitment to a project being career focused as opposed to the value of sharing time with family and friends. And I don't recall ever in that decision-making process physically sitting down and weighing up the pros and cons. I just naturally gravitate towards a particular area. And I think putting that then in the context of what that framework looks like of balance, and then trying to measure that up with aspiration for wealth, aspiration for health, aspiration for relationships, career, psychological well-being, trying to put them all at a level where I'm not trading off, but then also understanding what that actually means in working with other people as well. So that's a rabbit hole. Yeah, it's not an easy one to bite off, but I know you've had some experience on this with the add value piece of kind of, especially even on this last book that you wrote. But what are your thoughts there? What have you sort of pondered upon doing?
Absolutely right. So you're right, and there's definitely a link between this and the book that's coming this year, Add Value, because that really talks about tangible value, personal value, emotional value, service value, relationship value. So if you think about those aspects, just layer that on top of your quandary, then you already start to see that if you're considering those 5 aspects, you already are thinking about different priorities that don't always funnel down to just the business decision, which is what you were describing. So there is absolutely a correlation. So the book this year is good timing for this. And when we start doing deeper work around that with the model I know you're working on, it's going to dovetail really well. I guess the second thought that springs to mind for me, though, even comes from the coaching method, which is, as a coach, when I'm coaching people, I always endeavor to get them thinking of 3 types of goals anyway, not one. Now, for instance, as a company, I break them down as performance goals, learning goals, fulfillment goals. Now, from a company, those performance is their KPI. When you're dealing with an entrepreneur and those startup, performance is their passion, their purpose, the baby they're trying to build. It's the same thing. But by putting a focus on those 3, it forces them to look at the different aspects of their world. Because let's be frank, when you ask somebody, if you've got a blank canvas and anything you want to achieve 10 years from now, what would it be? It's unlikely the first thing springs to mind is I want to increase my sales by 6.4% or reduce my errors by 15.4% or make 7.4 more phone calls every day. No, it's fuck. I want freedom of travel to freaking Serbia, Croatia, Egypt, America. I want to have a house, time with my family and kids. That's the fulfillment ones. Because on the surface, our fulfillment goals often don't seem to have a direct correlation to our business or passion goals that way. However, there is a link, because if you're aspired and doing well towards one of them, you're a better person in all three of them anyway. Now, there's a deeper conversation, but by just even forcing people to look at three goals, that's my way of kind of making sure they're making some decisions around broader than just honing on that one priority.
And that's the interlink, yeah? So, I mean, even in putting this framework together, so I've just got the notes listed down here, but it's kind of addressing that idea of physical well-being. So I touched on that health kind of piece and well-being, family and direct circle of relationships, spiritual, career, which in the case of startups is that sort of professional and passion-driven focus, attitude and personal development, financial, which is that wealth piece, relationships in the context and kind of touching on what you touched on before, but the recognition of the difference between friends and family and then relationships that are work-driven relationships, and then putting them in the right kind of value piece to what it all means, and then just personal knowledge. And again, in exploring those ideas, I think what you mentioned before about the natural overlap of some of these. If I place a higher value in career, why is it that I'm doing that? What am I getting from that? And it may actually be financial gain, in which case I'm kind of, subconsciously putting financial gain at the higher piece of what that professional endeavor is, even though I see it as being putting all cards on the table within the career of choice. So it's the interlink between it, but I think it's also the natural part of the comfort zone that we all end up in those chaotic times or uncertainty, even like what we're going through now. The comfort zones that you end up within, I sort of look at that list and I find, I get a lot from that knowledge base, and it's kind of my dad's theory of you learn something every day, kind of making that a goal of learning something every day and kind of feeding that knowledge piece. My view on that is that will help me across every other aspect of what I'm doing. That, if you're taking the time to educate yourself, the application of that education applies to all of those areas. But then having that same sort of maturity to be able to then look at each of those aspects and see what it is that I'm getting from it, both value to others, but value to myself on each one of those decisions, I think is a deep area that you can't do as just a textbook, couple of paragraphs. Here you go. There's the guiding direction, and off you go. Well, everyone has their own journey themselves.
What you're describing, Chris, certainly, I mean, you're not saying these words, but what I'm hearing as you describe it, though, is also linking into the science of motivation, right? And you break that into biological, external, internal. If you're hungry, you eat. External, we're motivated by pays and salaries and awards, finances that gives us things. But you're talking there, you said for you, it's knowledge. And I instantly see that that's one of the intrinsic motivators, one of the 6 in the WP model. And that is, a thirst for knowledge and learning and continual learning. But our motivations also do change, right? So were you always that way? And I'll talk to me first. I mean, when I was in my 20s working for Kentucky in Europe, my drivers were very different than they are now, building and growing a business as a more mature man living in Australia, right? And so my intrinsic motivators, my internal drivers and motivations have moved and shifted. Now, you may well have 1 or 2 that stay with you for a longer time, but they do move and change, right? So there's definitely a correlation with what you're describing, like what is your motivation? Because that's what you're saying. Well, what is it that makes me prioritize this over that? What makes me prioritize career over time with family? There's layers under that definitely ties into these drivers of what's motivating me at any given moment in time.
Tell me, in your crazy whirlwind of a life over the last 30 years, do you have any regrettable motivations over that period of time? Maybe a time where you've traded off one of those for another.
Yeah, you know what? It's a great question. I didn't know we were going to talk about this. This is going to be really vulnerable.
You want to lie down on the couch and
No, I don't mind, mate. We're getting in the habit of sharing quite candidly on these things. Okay, here's what I'd say to that, and I've learned for myself to get comfortable. When I look back, I do believe I don't live with regret per se, in the sense that maybe some people do. I do have, and it's quite natural, because when I look back on my life, right, you go back 30 years and some of the decisions I made when I was working in Europe or when I moved to Australia or whatever that is. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I was not the same person I am now. And that's so when I look back, your mind plays tricks on you anyway. When you understand neuroscience, we've got neuroplasticity. So your memory around certain things has a shift and change anyway. Mm-hmm. Then you add to that, I've learned more in the time that's passed, you'd hope, right? And even if you haven't, you have, because you've lived more. So you've had more external forces impacting you. So when you look back at any situation, are you really looking at it with the same level of knowledge and capability and tools and resources that you had at the time you made the decision? And my answer to that would be unequivocally no. So therefore, the decisions I made at the time I made them, I made for the reasons I made at the time with the skills and the knowledge I had at hand. Now, some of those, could I have made different choices? Yes. Could I have spent longer looking at some of those factors? Yes. My Achilles heel, and I've said this to you quite candidly, I've always been, and I will say always to this, it's a dangerous word usually, but I'm going to say it because I think it's valid here, is as long as I can remember, I've generally put others and relationships ahead of tangible wealth, for example. And that's been a pattern, and that's cost me dear in my life at times. Now, do I regret? Now, am I making, I keep learning, learning's lifelong. I make different choices, different educations to move forward in a different path now. Fair enough, and that's what I'm doing. But does it mean I regret? No. You know, I remember my brother, my eldest brother, who is one of the people I respect most. He's such a wealth of knowledge. He's worked in banking his entire career. I mean, his entire life since he left school, and that's what he's worked. And he's worked with all the big ones. He's high up. He's, you know, and I look at the life he's built. And I remember having a conversation with him years ago where I was having this sort of reflective moment. And he held me a mirror up for me to see and appreciate, which was, but if you hadn't lived the life you live, you wouldn't have the experience that you had. You wouldn't be the person you are. And he's right. If I had not lived as freely on the road around Europe for 10 years, 11 years, the way I did, a year and a half between Australia and New Zealand, I wouldn't have the experiences that arm me to be the person I am now as a speaker, as a trainer and coach. So whilst it's cost me, and it has cost me dearly, it's cost me dearly financially, it's cost me dearly in relationships. Some of the people I love the most are not in my world. And some of it I don't even understand why. But do I regret it? No, because I've made myself transparent, vulnerable, and I put the best version of myself forward to the decisions I've made at any one moment in time. That I'm comfortable with.
And that's the thing with regret. Yeah, I think, you know, I know when it comes to me having a disagreement with someone, I've found I'm able to deal with that very well because I can pause and have a lens of empathy to understand that the reason we don't agree is that you're making a decision based on your best interests and the information that you've got at hand. The decision I'm making is based on the same elements. What's best for me, the information I've got at hand. I don't then apply that same level of empathy with Yester-me. I don't look back on decisions of the past and kind of realize that the decision that I made at the time was what was in my best interest with the information that I had at hand. Because it's like that thing where people sort of say, I'd love to go back to high school with the level of you know, wisdom that I have now. I think I'd enjoy it more. But you just don't have that opportunity in life to kind of revisit those moments with that, you know, sort of higher level of understanding that you get at a later stage on things. And it's that level of understanding that comes from the experience. And that is ultimately what makes you and evolves you as a person. And wanting to revisit those opportunities of decision, the fork in the road, the sliding door, I think is something that regret is based on. Had I made that decision at a different time, I may have made a different decision, but you may not have been at a point where you were at an evolved state to
Exactly.
understand if it was a good or bad decision.
Exactly. So now to that point, though, Chris, and here's life has a way, right? You've heard the expression. It was Ralph Waldo Emerson or one of those people, I'm sure. But what you resist persists. Might have even been Carl Jung. Carl Jung, actually, I think. What you resist persists. And sometimes the things we made bad choices about have a tendency to show up again in a different skin or a different form, right? It's why people tend to cycle from it's a different relationship, but it's the same shit. It's a different addiction, but it's the same shit. It's a different thing, but it's the same shit. We got the same shit. We've got the same stuff that comes up for us to learn. So we've actually got constant mirrors of our world that helps us learn what we've not learned the first time. That I'm sure you can relate to. I'm sure most people here can relate to. And the thing you're describing there, though, is what some people will not sometimes do. And you don't have to live with regret. You don't have to live with guilt in your past either. But I'll give you a very simple scenario. Let's relate to a hit and run. Let's say you accidentally hit somebody with your car. In that moment of time, you have a choice. You can run and not face the consequences of your actions, or you can do the right thing, which is try and get that person help, get them a medic, get to support, and try and make error for your ways. Now, and there may be a consequence with that. That's life. If we hit and run, and now relate that to other scenarios in life, we can hit and run on situations in our life, but the moment you realize you've done it, you can still make amends. What's wrong with picking up the phone and apologizing or owning something that happened 6 months earlier, a year before? You can make different choices now that actually can heal, for want of a better word, the past, and be kind to yourself. You know, it's the moment we have that realization that I'm now better equipped with tools that I have now that I didn't have then. I can now make this and I can do something different with it. Then you've grown. Then you've still, the choice you made served its purpose anyway, I think. It's being kinder to yourself.
And with a slightly different slant on that, but I think to the same sort of theme, I always like to look at it and say, from the point of view of, if there is any feeling of regret that is associated with that decision, what is it that you actually regret? It's generally not the decision. It's either the missed opportunity or the outcome of that decision. And you do have an opportunity to revisit that. So whilst you can't go back to that moment of a decision, you can go back to, is it an opportunity that I missed pursuing? Or is it a regret that I have of a direction that it took me? You can always change direction. You can always find those opportunities. So it's not about revisiting the moment of a decision. It's actually looking at the reason why you have regret associated with that and then pursuing that, as opposed to going back to the moment in time.
I agree. We don't necessarily want to go all Hollywood on everybody tonight, right? But it makes me think, as you're talking, it makes me think of Benjamin Button, right? Who says you go backwards. And then his letter at the end where he's right is going, you know, it's something along the lines of, it's never too late and you're never too old if you don't not happy with something to throw it out and start again or do something different and new. And it's like you say there, you miss one opportunity, it's going to show up in another skin. The door's going to open somewhere. Once you've got the realization, you've grown the tools.
Yeah, the other interesting one, and you might be able to shed some more light on this with a sort of a thinking of a methodology on your side. But as I've been going through this process myself too, I've realized two, I guess, very paradoxical ideas, as in they're very different, but sort of that whole journey and destination piece. Yeah, I kind of realized that I work best, I perform best. My best achievements have always been destination based, where I've understood the goal, the outcome, what I want to achieve, and there's I can then break that down to the steps that are required to do that, and it's all about achieving the goal. What I then find interesting is then if I look at all the other aspects of life, I actually get more satisfaction from the journey as opposed to the project-driven work, which is more that professional sort of approach. So to give you context there, you know, I was never one to say my ideal, satisfaction in a relationship is to be married. That was never the destination for me. It was about the journey of what that meant, and all the things that came into play. So So when I look at the things that I really truly value, I truly value the journey piece of what that means, as opposed to where I perform best is actually focusing on the destination and or almost breaking that journey down to a point of going to that. That's the part that I sort of found interesting in the way that if I'm taking a close hard look at myself and the way that I do that work, they're very different ideas. Yeah.
Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
Well, and again, this is complete. People, if you don't know, these Sunday rants are kind of Chris and I bouncing ideas, and so this is not planned. But actually, Chris, you're describing the same thing. Let me tell you what I'm seeing a picture of, and see how this sits. You know, take the example of with a marriage and getting married in life. You know that doesn't have a definitive end. Therefore, you appreciate the journey more. However, even what you're describing professionally, I think you're still describing the journey, right? Because you go from ideation to realization of birthing something that was just an idea and now it's functional and working. Now, that may have a definitive culmination picture that you saw, at which point you can exit, but is it not the journey that takes it from just some piece of atom in the brain, a spark of an idea, to actually something in the physical world? Is that in itself not the journey?
Very deep.
I would say,
very true.
I would actually say it's still the journey. It's a journey with a more definitive picture.
Yep.
That you kind of know is a point to exit and continue down another track. But it's a continual journey of birthing ideas to bring into fruition and birthing ideas to see what happens and navigating the inevitable challenges and hurdles and obstacles that come up on every one of them, right? When have you ever worked on a project from ideation to realization where it just happened like that and was smooth?
Never, and that's what I love about it. It truly is.
You love the journey through it as well. Maybe have a more different. It's an exit point, but it's a journey.
Yeah, vision and version, and it's the roadrunner theory almost of sort of. I do find if I was going through reflection on the last sort of 20, 30 years of my life, that it is very much the roadrunner approach of once I've caught something, it's kind of like, well, what do I do with it now? Yeah, it was all about the chase. It was all about the the TNT blocks and the fake Acme hammer. You know, that was the fun part. Yeah, so now I've got it. What do I do with it? And I think, it's interesting. That's the vision to version journey piece is what I thrive on. That's the area I love. The chase.
You're making me think of Hollywood again, because now I'm seeing the Joker from Batman, Heath Ledger's one, right, where he's going, I'm like a dog chasing parked cars, and I don't even know what I'd do with one if I caught one, right? Yeah. You're the roadrunner in this instance. You are the Joker in that instance. Well, that's in dialogue, man. And I know we're going to have more robust talks about this whole framework that you're building, that are fueling, that I know is going to serve certainly the innovation crowd and that cohort well. When we start getting back together, we're going to flesh that out and bring some stuff to that. I'm mindful of time though too, so I'm thinking, shall we have a quick chat about what we'll do Tuesday for the polish?
Do that. Yeah, absolutely.
So I know we've done that. For the benefit of people that sent in ideas, I know we got topics there. We are going to come back. We've had the last 2 weeks guests focused on some text lance. We've got a couple more in the wins and pipeline for that, but we also wanted to mix it and have some different things in there. And I know, Chris, you'd flagged an interesting topic that come up, which was that even people with strong minds and very confident and comfortable in their own skin have been having their curvy moments with the isolation, the lockdown, all the rest of it. This is really, no matter how strong-willed you are, everybody's having their kind of moments. Yeah. And so we're thinking Tuesday is a chance to slot into a behavioral piece on that. And we've got a couple of guests in mind that we're talking to. There's a couple that might come in, but we're talking to a couple of guests around that. But are we thinking we're happy with that for this Tuesday one, Chris? We've kind of talked about it. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think we can have some interesting chats with the right kind of people there, because this area of fragility right now is a common theme that I think everyone's just starting to get to that point, and especially we're on the precipice. Yeah, we're on that halfway between the road to recovery to just coming off the tail end of this, this isolation piece. And I think now is actually a dangerous time, because there's there's those that I'm speaking to are almost getting this sense of regret that they didn't do more with the time that they had in isolation. There are those who are chomping at the bit to kind of get back to a normal world. There's those who are sort of sitting in between both of them. But ultimately, it's all coming down to this fragile state of, I guess, missing the energy cues that they've got back. Touching on that relationship piece we spoke about at the start, but where they may get their energy pieces from during the day, and what it feeds them normally at an intellectual level and a spiritual level and a personal level, they're not getting from the things that they've used to replace that. So whilst many people have been able to do life as usual through online activity, there's pieces of that are missing that are naturally starting to have an impact on that psyche piece. And I think you bring into the mix of that, just to compound it, is that sense of uncertainty that just makes it very difficult to make bigger picture plans, to make any sort of definitive direction around where you're going and what you're doing. So that is bringing in this whole sort of instability with a lot of people. And I think there's a bit we can unpack there with the right kind of discussion.
Yeah, but as you're talking, I already go, you do realize, though, that even when you think things are certain, they're really not anyway, Chris, right? That's just always an illusion. Yeah. It's always an illusion. It's just this is more so than ever. It just seems more uncertain than ever. But anything outside of oneself, really, it's always just an illusion.
I'd love to be able to reference the quote. I don't even know what it is, but it's something around control being one of the biggest illusions that we have in life, that we just kid ourselves at any point to say that we've got that level of certainty control over life or anything.
The things you, at best, your actions, how you react to stuff out there around you, you're kind of making choices around that. But anyway, that might feed in. We've got definitely, as we said then, so I think what we'll do Tuesday, we'll go into that piece this week and bring it into a behavioral and a psyche and a mindset piece again, and then we'll pick up on the tech rushes the following week. I know I'm going to talk with Tony because I'd love to get Tony on now. I don't want to tell you, well, we spoke briefly, but for a guest, I don't want to say too much about Tony in case he can't, because I kind of build it up. And he's freaking awesome. He's awesome. He's got a really interesting career, shall we say. And he's so well through this. I'm hoping I can have a chat and twist his little finger to come on and have a drink with us on that Tuesday. But other than Tony, we've got a couple other people in mind. So we're going to put a focus on Tuesday's polished session, behavior, psyche, whether you're eager or with regret, whether you're on the side of stability or certainty, whatever it is you're dancing and playing with on a headspace piece through all of this, we're going to tackle more of that on Tuesday. So I'm looking forward to that one. Chris, thanks again, mate. Always like our Sunday sessions.
Yeah.
Heat hat.
I look forward to our chats. As I said, this is becoming my therapy session. So it's fantastic. Yeah. Send me the bill in the mail. Yeah.
Look after ankle, Chris. I'll speak to you on Tuesday.
Fantastic. Hey, just quickly before we go, gratitude piece this week.
Oh, yes. Actually, we got to do that. I'm glad you reminded. 100%. I've written them down, actually. I'll do mine first because I got a few. So this is quick, though. So Ellie Reed, Bill Bezos, Daniel Graham, Matt Baker, Trina Wilson, LJ, Aisha Paul, Heather Henderson, Michael Stein, Lynn Kaiser, Vicky Markov. Thank you for already pre-supporting the hush-hush copies of my next book. And yeah, thanks so much for that. Fletcher Hazeldine, thanks for joining us at short notice on last week for Chris and I. Thanks to my agents again. They sent me a really beautiful gift when you've been sitting in isolation for a few weeks and you get a gift out of the blue. And Joel Sloan, if you hadn't told me about a tracking number, I didn't get a mail slip that there was anything at the mailbox for me. I would never have known to go. So Joel Sloan, thank you. My personalized cookies with my name on are fantastic. Clive Canal, keep doing your great work, mate. I saw with the paella stuff again. I plugged your A, but you're a champion with your community. Heidi Gregory, Joanne Neville, you guys are just awesome. Thanks for personally being there for me. And one last one, Justin Lane, who is an insurance broker who cares. Even if they can't always find the right thing, he puts time in to try and make it work. Got a long list, but you know what? They're all worth mentions this week.
More and more gratitude every week.
I am.
We might have to dedicate a whole session just to your gratitude list. Yeah.
I cried through them. I'm very grateful, man.
Yeah. I'll keep mine the complete opposite and just have two names. And it's kind of a first one is a forward thank you, but also past thank you. But Viren Thakrar, I'm not sure whether you've met Viren, Mark, but Viren's in our community. He's actually lending a hand at our next webinar, which is based around people, culture, and innovation. Viren's been doing some fantastic work across that piece, and yeah, great guy. Sort of, those collaboration, partners that you love to have just to bounce ideas. Viren's fantastic like that. Actually, he's come out with a great game called Quigs, which is kind of designed to bring people closer together, but focused on relationships. So he's kind of running this now as an online course, doing some fantastic work, great collaborator, and really appreciate his offer for assistance at our next webinar. So thank you, Viren. And the other one is Brandon Burns. And I don't know whether you recall meeting Brandon up at our last startup boot camp. Yeah. Brandon's actually from Runway HQ, and he's been doing a brilliant job. What I've loved about Brandon is his level of passion and enthusiasm for this whole startup space. Is probably the only person I've seen who's equally driven by that desire to see startups come through as I am. So he's been doing a great job, and he's actually leaving the guys at Runway HQ, and he's going to join another company. I don't think he's made the announcement on who yet, so I'll keep that off the table. But he is actually leaving Runway HQ, and just as a personal thank you, but I think as a thank you to all of the startups that who came along to that boot camp, they definitely got value from the piece that you brought to the table, Brandon. So thanks for all your work, all your time at Runway HQ, and we really appreciate the outreach of help with all the stuff that we've done with Innovation Crowd. So, and that's it. My list of 2 on your list of 20.
Oh, you had 2, but it took longer.
Yeah, that's just me.
The quantity, my friend. There you go. It was good. Very good, Chris. Very good. We'll swap that note. All right, mate.
Done. Okay, my cat's trying to get out of the room here, so I'm going to go.
Black cat. It worked in the Matrix. You go and fix that.
Done. Right, I'll leave you off, and I'll talk to you on Tuesday.
See you, Hawkman.
Cheers, Mark.